Good morning everybody, welcome to Monday Morning's Indycar. My name is Gordon Ross. It's a beautiful day here out at Annie's Land. And in this morning's news, there are two items I wanted to mention to you this morning. The first one is actually to do with fishing. Now this is an old chestnut which comes up time and time again when we're talking about Brexit. But it's a little known fact that Michael Gove's father had a fish processing plant that was put out of business when the EU fishing quotas came into effect, or at least that's what he claims. And so Michael Gove, one of the arch Brexiteers, one of the most vocal proponents of leaving the EU, was charged with the getting back of these fishing grounds, and he teamed up with Ruth Davidson to make all kinds of pronouncements about how they were going to safeguard Scottish fishermen's fishing grounds and the fishing grounds of the UK in general after Brexit. And as soon as we were out of the EU, we would get all our fishing grounds back, and magically there would be money for everybody to make, and the fishing fleet would grow and everything would be wonderful. Now, the fishing industry in the United Kingdom in general is a very tiny proportion of our gross domestic product. However, it is an important industry, not trying to minimise that, and it's very important to Scotland, particularly in the north east, where most of the UK catch is landed, about 60% of it. But the problem is that the European Union, during the negotiations over the transition deal, this is the period of about 21 months between us officially leaving the EU next March and everything actually coming into effect. In other words, a sort of delay period while the rest of the United Kingdom kind of realigns itself for Brexit. This 21-month period, during the negotiations for that, the European Union has drawn a red line of its own and said that the current fishing ground arrangements must stay in place for that period of time. So in other words, Michael Gove's promises to the fishermen about getting instant access after Brexit seem to have fallen flat on their face, and it looks like the fishermen of Scotland and England will have to wait about 3 years to get back their fishing rights to their own fishing grounds. So it's a bit of a body blow to the fishing industry, and it kind of blows out of the water the big promises that Gove and Ruth Davidson have been making. That's not to say the fishing grounds won't come back eventually, they will, but it will take upwards of 2.5 years for that to happen. And I don't know how many fishermen will be happy about that, but it's a very long time to wait to get back anything like the fishing grounds we had before we joined the European Union. And I'm old enough to remember things like the Cod Wars. I don't know if you are old enough to remember this, but there was a massive, almost came to a shooting war with Iceland, between the United Kingdom and Iceland back in the early 70s, when British boats were fishing in Icelandic waters and Icelandic boats were fishing in British waters. Gunboats were sent, and there were problems. There were severe problems between Iceland and the UK, and it got to the point where we were on the verge of firing shots across the bows of fishing boats. It was that bad. So we'll be welcoming back those glory days after Brexit. Anyway, moving along to the next subject. Now the next subject is the one that we're all sick of hearing about. It's the nerve gas attack on the Skripals, who are still in hospital, still apparently in critical condition, still strangely no photographs of them, no evidence of them being in a hospital or which hospital they're in, or any more accurate word on their condition, which is a bit odd. But there again, the whole thing is a bit odd. Now we have the United Kingdom inviting the United Nations chemical weapons inspectors to Portadown to take away a sample of this Novichok type of nerve toxin that they have isolated, that they found presumably in the body or in the bloodstream of the 2 or 3 victims. Now, I'm not saying that the Russians haven't done this, but what's interesting about it is the fact that Britain seems to be completely ill-equipped to deal with even a tiny, and I'm talking about a minuscule attack with the nerve agent involving only 2 people. Somebody was pointing out recently, and this was a former weapons inspector, was pointing out that if a Novichok type weapon had been deployed anywhere in the UK, anybody who came into contact with any of it, and that would mean the entire number of people who were in the restaurant at the time when the Skripals were eating, they would all be dead, because any exposure to that material at all, even the tiniest microscopic speck of it, touching your skin or breathing it in, would kill you. And not only that, but the Skripals would not have been able to go for a walk and sit on a bench if they had been poisoned with a fatal nerve toxin. So whatever this stuff is, it is a highly diluted version of it, which seems to paralyse the victim rather than kill them. So it's of a type, Novichoks were designed to do just that, to paralyse their victims. In the event of a war, they were designed to incapacitate the enemy's troops completely, not necessarily killing them, but taking them out of the fight. Now, it could well be that this nerve agent was manufactured by Russia. Nobody seems to know that. But it also seems to be that Iran, as late as last year, possessed Novichok-type weapons and were stockpiling them. It might well be that other Middle Eastern countries have been stockpiling such weapons. We don't know. But the finger is pointing at Russia, and you have to wonder what the Russians get out of this. Well, if you look at the situation as it is now, we have, with Brexit happening, the European Union is in a weakened state. The UK is in a weakened state. And with Donald Trump in charge of America, America is in an unpredictable state. So no matter what the Russians have been up to, if they have been using this nerve agent, if they have been interfering with the results or somehow messing with the voting of Donald Trump, or they've been somehow manipulating people online using boiler room tactics with people making posts online. There's no evidence of that, by the way, but if they have been doing that, then it's worked, because everything is in chaos. The UK is in uproar. The European Union is running around like a headless chicken. NATO has been called in, and the whole of the Western world seems to be basically running about daft, trying to catch up and work out what to do about this nerve toxin. But there are problems, because they can't actually sanction Russia very much, and they know they can't, because Russia supplies a large quantity of the natural gas which keeps Western Europe warm during the winter. And it would be very easy for the Russians to simply turn that off if they felt, if they went in a huff over this. So there's a lot of diplomatic activity going on at the moment over what to say and what to do, and was it Russia, was it not Russia? There's no evidence of anything at the moment other than the fact that a weakened nerve toxin was used apparently to attack a former Soviet agent who was no longer any threat to anybody. So it seems to me, I don't know about you, but this looks to me like if this was an attack by Russia, it was simply to cause mischief only. It was just to see what would happen. Russia is very good at probing our defences in the air and on the sea. We know this because they fly around our airspace all the time. They sail their ships around the North Passage between Iceland and Scotland all the time to get out into the ocean. And of course they're going to test our defences, our conventional defences. Maybe now they're just testing our defences on chemical weapons, who knows? But the point is, it's got the entire West shaken up and in a panic. And I don't think that does Russia any real harm. In fact, it seems to do nothing but strengthen Russia's position. Russia has also been, not rearming itself, but it's been very cleverly re-equipping its armed forces with much more sophisticated and undetectable weaponry. And it's been consistently doing that for years. So have the Americans, incidentally, for decades been doing this. There is a Cold War going on. It has been going on in the background for a long time, and it still goes on today. However, with North Korea apparently looking for peace with South Korea, and Kim Jong-un having got his achieved his ambition, which was to sit down at a peace table with the President of the United States. Now that he's achieved that, it seems that the threat of nuclear war has receded, at least from that quarter. China is the sleeping giant in all of this at the moment, because the Chinese are at the moment training thousands and thousands of business people, business runners, business managers, bankers, financiers, because Russia is no longer the big power, big former communist power. It's now China. But world politics being what they are, this seems to be a reshuffling of the deck, I think. And I also think that the Skripal poisoning was a feint. It was a test to see how the UK would respond to a small-scale chemical attack. And they've used Skripal as bait. He cost the Russians nothing. He was a former agent. They don't really care about former agents. They quite happily kill him. And I'm sure that the FSB would either hire somebody to do this work or get some other country to carry out the attack, because they wouldn't want anything to point back towards Russia. But none of this benefits the West, obviously. It benefits Russia, because despite the fact that we can't blame them, and I'm not blaming the Russians for this, it doesn't do their case any harm at all to see the West in complete panic. Does it affect Scotland in any way? Well, I was thinking about this the other day. Do we have any kind of facility for dealing with a chemical attack in Scotland? I don't know. Has anybody got the answer to that question? When we become independent, and I'm saying when we become independent, because I guarantee you we will want to get out of this chaos next year, and it's the only chance we're going to get out of it. Scotland is going to need to have its own not secret service, but its own defence system, and its defensive systems need to be targeted at areas where there are actually some real threats, and that means not necessarily nuclear threats. It means things like nerve agents and terrorist attacks, and it would be more worthwhile, if you're designing a defence force for a new country, to concentrate on the threats that actually exist, and those are things like terrorism, infiltration, and the use of nerve agents, biological weapons as well, rather than focusing on the big ticket numbers like nuclear weapons, which are easily defensible, incidentally. Believe it or not, we could buy an off-the-shelf anti-missile system from the Russian state at the moment, which could quite easily shoot down every single missile fired at you from any direction, including cruise missiles and ballistic missiles, the type that lob nuclear weapons at you. So it seems to me that there's a lesson to be taken from all of this, and I think the lesson is that we need to be prepared for different types of threats. And no matter where the Skripal poison came from, it wasn't designed to kill hundreds of people. This was a demonstration. This is saying, we have got this stuff, whoever it was, and we can give it to somebody that we don't like in such a way that it doesn't affect a whole room full of people in a restaurant. Now that's a very cleverly designed nerve agent, I think you'll have to agree. So however it was administered to the victims, it was a watered down version of the Novichok agents. So there are lots of different types of them, incidentally, but this particular one seems only to have affected the victims and one policeman. Now, what did he do differently with the victims that the ambulance people didn't? Because they didn't get contaminated despite rolling the victims over into the recovery position. Did the policeman carry out mouth-to-mouth resuscitation? I don't know. It might be that he had some body contact or body fluid contact with the victims, and that's how he got contaminated. But my point is that a real Novichok nerve agent of the type used in military applications would have killed everybody in that restaurant and hundreds of other people around the city. It's not Novichok. This is some kind of designer weapon. And that's what makes it a bit more worrying, actually, because if it's undetectable and it doesn't kill everybody else, you could use this against a head of state. You could use this against a visiting Prime Minister or something like that. So it's a warning, it's a wake-up call to us all that this type of weaponry can be used, and it can be used very effectively to take out anybody they like. It may not be the Russians, it might be the Iranians, it might be anybody, it might be the Syrians, for goodness sake. Who knows who it was? But the point is, we weren't ready for it, and we're still not ready for it. When Scotland becomes independent, as I say, we need to think about these problems. They're not going to just affect Britain, they will affect us as well to some degree, because remember, British people are going to come and live here. English people are going to leave Brexit land because they can't stand it anymore and they want to live here. And some of those people might be or might become targets of rogue states, we don't know. But the Scottish Government, when it forms a new defence strategy, needs to think about this. Anyway, that's the subject for today. Fishing grounds being lost for the next maybe 2.5 years because of a red line by the EU and because the British government has backed down. And Britain is not prepared even for a very minor chemical attack on its citizens. And I'm talking about just 2 people. Imagine if it had been hundreds or thousands of people. How could we have dealt with that? It would have been a catastrophe. The whole city of Salisbury could have been at risk. So it makes you think, and I think no matter who did it, whether it was the Russians or not, we have to think about this now as a potential threat. Not just bombs, not just people driving cars at folk on the pavement, although those are threats as well. We need to look at this. Anyway, I'm off. Have a good day. Speak to you tomorrow. Bye for now.